Wednesday, June 16th, and this is the Hendrick Hudson School Board of Education meeting. Can I get a motion to open the meeting, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Can we start the meeting tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. One sec. So as you can see, many of us are masked this evening because we are in the district office tonight in person. And as per directives, we still have to be masked and 6 feet apart when on school property. So some of us are live and masked, and some of us are still live but at home and unmasked. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as stated, please? Oh, wait a minute. Retirement reception first. Oh, hold on, hold that. We're going to do our retirement reception first.
Yes, we'll turn it over to Laura and Enrique. We have some of our principals and other supervisory folks with us tonight, so we can honor the retiring class of 2021 tonight at our board meeting. So I'll turn it over to Laura.
Good evening, everybody. So this is not our normal way. We like to celebrate our retirees, but in this hybrid world that we're in, we are doing a virtual celebration. We have been in communication with our staff that are retiring, and I appreciate the administrators that all offered to come tonight and speak on behalf of the various staff. As you can see, or you will be able to see, we have some wonderful words from some of our teachers, chauffeurs, different staff that have worked with us to share some of their memories of working at Hendrick Hudson, what they'll miss most, and what their plans are for the future. So it's always a bittersweet moment when we have staff leaving us, but we're always excited for them and the next chapter of their lives. So I'm actually going to go a little bit out of order. I am going to ask Liz to jump in. She has a lot of staff that have already retired. So some of them may not, they're on the back of the end of the list, but they may not be actually present because they already have retired. So I'm going to let Liz jump in first, and then I want to spend some time highlighting teachers and other staff.
Good evening, everybody. So yeah, we fortunately or unfortunately have a number of staff that have retired, and I will start probably with the person who's been out the longest. He actually left in August of 2020, and that would be Alan Templeton. Alan started with us in 1992, worked at the high school, and then moved out to Furnace Woods. Everybody probably saw him in their buildings because he's did a lot of our HVAC work for us. He loved his job here. And even after he left, he came back and said to Anthony, I really think maybe I might want to come back and work. He still, stays in touch, and we see him once in a while here at the district office. He'll stop in to say hello. He really was a very dedicated employee, and he is missed greatly. Trying to find somebody to pick up all the work that he did for us with the heating and cooling systems in the buildings, has not been easy, but everybody's, learning how to get along without him. And we wish him the very best in his retirement. He's got lots of grandchildren to spend time with, and I'm sure he is enjoying himself. And after Alan, we then have Brian Sullivan. Brian started with us at the high school in 2007. He worked for over in Orange County. He worked over there for a highway department for many years. Got a little bit tired of driving truck and hauling trash, and came here to work for Hendrick Hudson. Started at the high school working nights, and then moved over to Furnace Woods working on the day shift and driving a bus for us. Reliable, conscientious, really liked what he did, working with the children and being a driver. He loved the daily contact in the school with staff and with the kids. And he's spending a lot of his time visiting Mystic and, enjoying being retired and taking his long walks along the river. And we wish Brian the very best. We also have Tommy Kiesler, who retired. Tommy was one of our chauffeurs. He worked for the town of Cortland for many years in the highway department and then the recreation department. He got a taste of working with special ed kids when he drove a bus occasionally for Norwest Regional Special Services. And that was when he decided, when he retired, he was probably going to try to keep driving a bus. He came to work with us and he only drove our special ed runs. And he did that from when he started with us until when he retired. He really, enjoyed, we're doing that. And he really enjoyed, being a part of the lives of those children. We miss him. And I'm sure the kids miss his, his daily good morning that he gave them every day. And we wish him well. And he too is, improving his golf game and spending time with his grandchildren. Then we have Bill Small. Billy Small also was one of our chauffeurs. And Billy came to us after working for, I believe, Schindler Elevator for many years in the city. His dad was our head mechanic at the bus garage for many years. And when I started here, his dad worked in the garage as the head mechanic there. And he kept telling him, Bill, you got to come work at the school district. You'll love it. You'll have such a great time. They're such good people. And Billy, when he retired, decided he would come here. And he also, drove a van for us for years. And he too, worked with the special ed population and absolutely loved it. Loved his job, but he's spending his second retirement now, between his house in Buchanan and his house that he has in the Carolinas. And he is missed very much. And we hope, that we get to see more of him as the days go on. And last but not least is Sandy Kotick. Sandy, again, another one, everybody comes to us after they leave their, their first job. They come and they work for us. And Sandy worked for the Verplank Post Office for many years. She's a graduate from Hendrick Hudson. She knew a lot of people when she came here. She knew people because of the post office and also for being a resident in the area. And Sandy, she's very dedicated to Hendrick Hudson. She loved her job here. She thought it was, she couldn't believe how much fun she was having and being paid to do it. And at the same time, she too, the special education children had a very special place in her heart, and she misses them. And she, but she thought it was really the best for her to, to move forward and to enjoy her retirement. Her husband's retiring as well from over at Lafarge, and they're going to do some traveling and, visit her mom and stepdad who live upstate, and head out to Ohio to visit her brother. So we wish everybody well, and we miss them, but we wish them the best of luck in the next chapter. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you very much.
Nice to hear the background and stories of everybody.
Thank you, guys.
So I am going to move on to allow Mr. Owens to speak. He has two teachers that are retiring from Blue Mountain Middle School. So I'm going to allow him to talk about Mark Bjornson and Donna Miller. Greg, are you able to pull up the slides?
Give me one moment.
Okay.
Laura, I'm not seeing a document specifically for Blue Mountain. Is it the presentation
Yep.
separately? It's the update that they have, or?
The 2021 retirement recognition.
We currently don't have one listed document for the under board docs. You can share it with me and I will bring it up on screen if you have that.
All right. Power of technology. All right, Mr. Owens, you can take it away.
Okay, good evening. Yep, I'm unmuted, just checking. Good evening, everyone. I'm mildly distracted. We had our first outdoor concert, so I'm in my office and I can see out the window. A lot of Woodstock-like features, both good and bad. They overwhelmed us with the cars. Didn't really use the shuttles. I'm noticing that there's a weird dynamic when parents and students and schools are all together, because the kids feel like they don't really have to listen to the parents or the school staff. So it's definitely a little Woodstocky out there. Anyway, I came to Blue Mountain. For me, it was 13 years ago, and I inherited both Mr. Bjornson and Ms. Miller. I'm going to intertwine my discussion about the two of them. Thinking about them really made me think how there really is no set formula or recipe for a great teacher. There just really isn't. And these two are two really good examples of how different two people can be, but yet really, really good teachers. A couple things they have in common is that they're both very knowledgeable in their field, and students will give any adult a lot of credit if they know that the adult knows what they're talking about. And these two are both experts in their field of mathematics. And the second part is you have to enjoy students, children at some level. And if students understand that you're in there for them and you know what you're talking about, you're most of the way there. And again, both these individuals enjoy students. They have done for decades now, both of them. One secret ingredient in the recipe for a great teacher, in my humble, not so humble opinion, is both of them started elsewhere. That's a powerful force when you can come into education after having done something else. Mr. Bjornson spent time in the Peace Corps. Ms. Miller spent time in the business world, and two very different worlds again, very reminiscent of the two individuals. But yet those experiences just put things in perspective when you start to work in the school building. For most of my time here with Mr. Bjornson, if I had to average conversations per day, he would be off the charts on the least number of conversations per year that I've had. And that's not a knock. That's just he's a quiet, professional, no nonsense kind of a person, in the gentle way, not in a tough way. He is a man of such few words that in a meeting, if he does say something, the room gets eerily quiet. So it's a noticeable thing when you have a department meeting or some raucous meeting, and the person that doesn't usually say too much has something to say, and the room gets quiet, and they really want to listen to him. So he's very effective in that way. The last few years of his career, we were able to, and this is something I'll speak about a little bit later with the report, we've been able to meet the needs of students who really have some gaps in their learning. And Mr. Bjornson, 3 years ago, I said, would you be interested in working with small groups of students to identify the gaps in their math knowledge, fill those gaps, and move them back out into the mainstream? And he jumped at the opportunity. We're actually interviewing for his position this week, and he has said that it's one of the most rewarding aspects of the job he's ever done in his many, many years of his career. So I always appreciate it. And now between that position and these interviews, I've spoken to Mr. Bjornson more in the last year or two than I have in the dozen years before that. At the other side of the spectrum, you have Ms. Miller. High energy, very, very active. Again, the kids enjoy being with her, and she obviously enjoys them. If I had to rank most words per year, Ms. Miller would be at the top of my list. A lot of that has to do with the very energetic way she goes and tackles some above and beyond activities. So the career day activity, which is something that Blue Mountain was doing since before I got here, is really, she enlists a lot of help, but it's really a one-woman show. So it's akin to a small Normandy invasion where we have close to 100 people coming in, guests talking about careers. There's a schedule so that no student sees the same person twice. And Ms. Miller just orchestrates that year after year, and it takes a lot of effort. In addition, Ms. Miller created a partners program years ago to align students with senior citizens. And as she always does, she is very self-critical of how things are going and very willing to improve and change things. And as some of her partners were more, as they aged out, so to speak, she was able to then reinvent the system and utilized retired teachers, largely from our system, which reinvigorated those retired teachers. And it was a really great connection with our middle school children and those now senior citizens retired teachers. So I've had the distinct pleasure of working with two very different but equally powerful, effective, great math teachers, and I appreciated every minute of every year from both of them, and I thank them both.
Thank you, John. I am now going to ask Dr. Kramer to speak on regarding Heather Gillis.
Good evening, everyone. Before I talk about Heather, I just want to echo what Liz said with regards to Al and Brian. They've both been at Furnace Woods since I've been there and are greatly missed. So good luck to both of them in their retirement. And so Heather has been teaching at Furnace Woods for, I believe, 26 years. And while I've been here, she's taught second and third grades. I can honestly say she is one of the kindest teachers I have ever met. Heather cares deeply about her students and always does whatever she can to meet their needs. My favorite thing about Heather's classroom is when she does read alouds. She loves to read aloud to her class, and she reads an excerpt from a chapter book every day, typically something like Super Fudge or Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. And if you walk by during this time, you see the kids glued to their seats with their eyes glued to Heather. She does the voices of each character. She reads the story with enthusiasm and excitement, and it's just mesmerizing. I secretly asked some of the kids in her class this year to describe Ms. Gillis, and these are some of the words they shared. Smart, nice, loving, awesome, caring, cool, amazing, the best, terrific, generous, special, good, fun, sweet, and epic. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Heather, for your many years of dedication to Furnace Woods and to your students. Your kind heart and caring smile will be missed. Best of luck to you in all of your future endeavors.
Thank you, Dr. Kramer. And Dr. Kramer is one more person who's retiring. We do not have a slide for Denise, but Denise Rose is a teaching assistant at Furnace Woods who is retiring.
Right, so Denise has been in Hen Hud, I believe, since 2002, which she started as a teacher's aide and then became a teaching assistant in 2010. She also works for Mother Connection in the before and after care programs at Furnace Woods. So she is very busy. And she can always be counted on to help out wherever needed. I think she has subbed probably in every class in the building, especially this year because we're short of subs and shorthanded in general. And she is never afraid to ask questions and always wants to do the right thing. Again, I got some kids to describe Mrs. Rose, and this is what they shared. Happy, funny, caring, nice, cool, encouraging, creative, helpful, good-hearted, and generous. So Denise, thank you for your years of dedication as well, and best of luck to you in the future.
There's lots of muted clapping, but I can see it happening. We all applaud. Thank you so much, Dr. Kramer. And I would like Mr. Mackin to speak about Jill Wheeler, who is one of our administrative assistants who just recently retired.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I hope everybody's well. Good to see everyone. Congratulations to all our retirees. I do too want to quickly recognize Alan Templeton. When I began at Hendrick Hudson, as was mentioned, Alan was at the high school. And I think any building principal will tell you there are, aside from the obvious critical staff positions like teachers, that are quite obvious that you need a good staff to have a great school. There are some real critical ones for administrators, and a good head custodian is one of them, someone that you can work with and rely on, someone that communicates with you. Alan exemplified all of those things, but what I most appreciated about him was the fact that it wasn't always our discussions about the building that I enjoyed the most. He is a family man, he is a gentleman, and he always showed an interest in how my family was doing, how others were doing, and he was missed when he left the high school and went to Furnace Woods, but the high school definitely can wear on you after a number of years. So I think it was a good oasis for Alan. So I wish him the best in his retirement. Much in the same vein as I mentioned, any building administrator understands the importance of having critical, skilled people in critical positions. Administrative assistants kind of hold that same, position. When you have great assistants that are very skilled in the many, many things that come their way every day, it is something that makes your job as an administrator a lot easier. And any of our administrative assistants at the high school will tell you that I think they love their job because it's not boring. It's not like, and I don't mean to put it this way, it may come out the wrong way, but it's not the same thing every day. Whether it's a time of the year or it's time of the day, things are vastly different, and people have to be very skilled at handling those kinds of waves that constantly come at you. Jill Wheeler was one of those people. She worked in the main office, actually started the same year that I did back in 2002. And I started off in the assistant principal's office. So I didn't get to work directly with Jill, more indirectly at first. But when I transitioned to the main office, Jill was there with Mrs. Small, and really whipped me into shape. Taught me how to be a principal and what to do and the things that we needed to do to run the building, and supported me. And also counseled me, Jim, you think you want to do that? Or maybe you want to think about that, or this. And that's what good assistants do. What I think I remember most and love most about Jill was, working in a school, you have to love kids. And Jill had the privilege of sitting in that main office right near the PA that students did announcements every morning. And each year we'd have two volunteers. It was kind of a passing of the torch each year from seniors to the rising seniors. And each year they would, stand right in Jill's workspace to access the PA, and they would do their announcements. And each year she would build a special relationship with those two students. Almost a motherly relationship, and they would often come down when they weren't doing announcements, or if they had a problem, or if they had some some advice they needed, or to look, Mrs. Wheeler, look at this prom dress, what do you think? She was really an advocate for children, and I think that's what I miss most about her, is watching her interact with our kids. I think that was the most special thing about Jill, above and beyond her skill as an assistant, which goes without saying. She was just a very special lady for our students to have in that main office, especially when they needed someone, a shoulder to lean on, an ear to somebody to listen to some of the problems they were having. So Jill retired last year because she was moving on to another stage of her life as a grandma. I believe her daughter had triplets, so she didn't get any less busy. Well, we can say that. She definitely is busy as grandma. I think she was weighing, what's going to be easier, being a grandma to triplets or staying in the high school with Mr. Mackin? Essentially, the triplets grandma won out, and she has been missed since she left, and I wish her the best.
Thank you, Mr. Mackin. And if you can see in Jill's write-up that she shared with us, and as so many of our employees that are Hendrick Hudson graduates that come back and can recontribute back to the community. And I know my time working at the high school, I loved getting to hear stories from Jill about her time at Hendrick Hudson, and how much she loved the community and loved the school. So we wish her the best. So at this time, we have been able to, do our best to talk about all of our retirees. The list is short, yet it's long. When we lose these people, like I said, it's bittersweet. We spend a lot of time and they become part of our community. And we always do hope that they stay in touch and they continue to do so. So congratulations to everyone. And we truly wish them the best of luck in their future endeavors. It looks like we have Mrs. Miller is going to be, I think, looks like she's planning a business with dancing possibly, and some other exciting things happening. It looks like Mr. Mackin has the background that a lot of our retirees might be living in. So again, congratulations to everybody. And thank you for everybody who was able to speak on their behalf tonight. Sorry, we could not do this in person, but we wanted to do our best to honor them.
Okay. As board, we also have a couple of trustees who are leaving us this year after very long tenures, so we would like to honor them as well. Lori, I'm going to start with you. Lori has volunteered.
Oh geez, this was done better last year.
Lori has volunteered for 12 years as a school board trustee. During her tenure, she's had the opportunity to serve in a leadership role as vice president. Lori has been an active participant on the facilities committee and has been a proponent of improving athletic facilities, amongst other things. I am very happy to see her efforts have been rewarded with the completion of our current capital project. Lori has brought her experience as a teacher to the board, using it to inform many of the discussions around classroom learning and student support. She's never hesitant to share her views and to challenge the decisions which she opposes or agrees with. One of the important qualities of a board trustee is to be willing to contribute your viewpoint and participate in discussion, even if your viewpoint goes against the majority, because a board is stronger with a variety of opinions. Lori, we wish you all the best in your future endeavors, and we thank you for your time on the board.
Thank you. Thank you.
A gift for Lori.
Oh.
I'll echo some of the comments that that Carol made. Lori and I have had many conversations, whether it's about athletics or our instructional program. As Carol mentioned, her classroom experience, working in a high school that has great diversity, has been such an asset to our school community and our board. Not only that, but Lori is incredibly involved at her high school, advising and chaperoning and planning trips, and really is completely engaged and immersed with what happens in high schools, and has been a great sounding board for some things that we want to do, but also has brought an incredibly important perspective to our work, to my work, to our school board's work. So thank you and good luck, and we will see you around the corner from the middle school.
Then we're talking.
We are also this year losing Mary Pat Brugge from the board. Mary Pat has given many hours to the Hendrick Hudson School District in a volunteer capacity, dedicating herself to improving the educational experience and the academic achievement of our students. She's given 15 years of service to the district as a Board of Ed trustee and simultaneously as an active PTA participant. You would often see Mary Pat at district-wide fundraisers and other activities, willing to pitch in wherever she could to improve the lives of our students. Her board leadership roles included 4 years as board president, during which time she headed the hiring search for our current superintendent, Mr. Hochreiter. Hiring a superintendent is one of the most rigorous and important jobs of a Board of Education, and she led that very ably. During her tenure on the board, Mary Pat has focused on improving rigorous educational offerings for our students, on improving facilities, and on fiscal responsibility. She has brought her financial background to the district as a longstanding member of the Finance Committee as well. Mary Pat's contributions to the board will be missed. We thank you for your years of service and wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
Thank you.
And as Carol mentioned, Mary Pat has been on the board for quite some time, and I have been superintendent for almost 8 years. And I think of the 8 years I have been superintendent, I could probably count out at least half of that time I've spent with Mary Pat, whether it was on the phone or emails or text messages, or at the time we were able to have in-person leadership meetings. But her perspective and her experience has been such an asset to the board and to me. Having 3 boys go through the school district and end up in 3 different career fields and traveling the world, let alone the country. But her perspective and seeing things through the eyes as a very, very engaged parent all the way through when her boys were little up until her board service. And I'll certainly remember fondly all of our conversations and experiences together, even though we pulled our hair out at times, and certainly you made mine more gray quicker than I anticipated.
I color mine.
You color yours. But such a tremendous asset, and was such a special person to help me land and get acclimated in Hendrick Hudson. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Turnover on a board is always very difficult. Stability in board and administration are good for education for our children. So having
We've done our best to help that.
yes, thank you.
27 years.
Yes. All right, now can I get a motion to approve the agenda as stated, please? Can I get a second? All in favor? Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as, oh, wait, before we do that, does anybody have anything to pull from the consent agenda? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as stated?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we do have a couple of items pulled from the consent agenda. Give me just one moment. Okay, so we've got a couple of donations this evening. The first one that Greg is pulling up is not the one I have on top, hang on, is a donation totaling $75,000 for the Hendrick Hudson School District. Entergy is donating $75,000 for developing hands-on STEM programs at each elementary school under the Princeton Plan reorganization. The grant funds will be utilized as follows. Frank G. Lindsay, which will be our K-1 school, will be outfitted with a teaching kitchen and garden/greenhouse. BV, which will be our 2nd and 3rd grade school, will house a rooftop weather station and weather lab. Furnace Woods, which will be our 4-5 school, will be given ripple tanks and a portable digital star lab to study physics and astronomy. We thank you very much to Entergy for this donation as they are phasing out their time here with us. Joe, did you want to say anything about this before we move on?
Yeah, Entergy has been just an outstanding partner to us. Over $500,000 in grant funds in the last, I think it's 8 years. And they really wanted to leave a legacy as they move from actively running the power plant to selling it as they did the whole tech. So they wanted to leave a legacy. They have made a great number of donations that had to do with STEM and technology and supporting Project Lead the Way and other endeavors. So as we transition in a little over a year to the Princeton plan, we wanted to connect their donation to the curriculum and be able to build some special programs and opportunities for kids that they'll be able to experience in those schools that we otherwise wouldn't be able to provide. So thank you to Entergy. They have been an incredible partner, and we hope that Holtec certainly has big shoes to fill in that department, but it will be a gift and opportunities for kids that obviously will live well beyond Entergy's footprint here.
So again, on behalf of the school district, thank you very, very much for that donation. Our next donation this evening is a donation for $100 for the Barbara Katzenstein Scholarship Fund. The Office of Special Education has received donations in the amount of $100 to be utilized to pay for partial summer camp funding for students with significant handicapping conditions. Thank you very much for that gracious donation. And lastly, we have a donation for $2,400 for the Hendrick Hudson School District. Mary Jacquemone, I hope I said that correctly, has made a donation of $2,400 to the Cultural Enrichment Program at the Furnace Woods Elementary School through the Microsoft Corporation Matching Contribution Program. Thank you very much, Mary, for your very generous donation, and Microsoft for matching that. Okay, and that will bring us, oh, wait, can I get a motion to approve these donations, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Sorry, I'm a little off my game because I'm in a different setting tonight. All right, so that brings us to our audience comment section on non-agenda items. And to remind the public, we do have public comment sections, usually 2 of them, but not always. Tonight we do have 2, one for non-agenda items and one for agenda items. To maintain an orderly meeting, the board has established the following guidelines for those wishing to address the board. Each speaker should sign in with the district clerk prior to commenting. When called, each speaker should step up to the podium and state their name and affiliation, if applicable, prior to starting their comments. Letters, petitions, or other written materials should be handed to the district clerk. Each speaker is permitted 3 minutes for their comments and must be recognized by the board president. All comments must be directed to the board president. The board will listen to comments but will not necessarily debate or discuss items. Operational matters will be directed to school administrators for handling. The board is not permitted to address personnel or individual student matters in open session. The board may limit repetitive comments in order to give time to others wishing to speak, as well as to maintain meeting efficiency. The board expects comments to be made without interference from the audience and in a civil manner. Thank you very much. And I see we have a commentator this evening.
Good evening, everybody. I am Pete Hillman. I'm currently a proud parent of one elementary school student. I was a proud parent of 2 elementary school students. I hold a doctoral degree from Teachers College, Columbia University. Over the last 10 or so years, I've worked in educational research across the United States. I have also had the fortune of working on educational research in a couple of European countries also. And I tell you that simply because I want to appreciate the difficult nature of educational change and what that means for you as board members. So I respect and recognize the work that you guys are trying to do here, and I offer you kudos. I do have a few points that I wish to raise for the board and the community. In the months leading up to the decision, as a community, we heard a variety of statements from the board and from Mr. Hochreiter that indicated that there was no negative impact of academic outcomes for the Princeton Plan model. Nobody has said this, so I'm going to say this. These statements are a little bit misleading because, of course, there's no research about this. It's a 73-year-old model for racial desegregation. And so those are a little bit misleading. I wish those statements had sort of been put into context a little bit more. I think it adds to some of the misconceptions that are out there. There is, of course, a lot of research out there about some of the aspects of the Princeton Plan model that is going to have to be implemented. Not least, well, I can't do this in 3 minutes, but not least, some of this research is focused around reduced grade band schools and increased transitions. So, for example, data shows us there is statistically significant reduction in academic success for students who enter middle school and high school who have undergone multiple transitions in elementary schools. So that means that all students are impacted by increased numbers of transitions in elementary schools. That is particularly younger children, and disproportionately negatively we see, or there are disproportionately negative impacts that we see in children who have special education services, children who have low NCS families, and children who are English language learners. There is generally understood to be a 2-year cycle associated with increased transitions. That means the first year we have academic loss, and the second year we generally begin to return to normalcy, although we still have to accommodate the fact that we lost that academics for a year. Members of the board and members of the community, you guys had your children enter in, or your peers' children enter into kindergarten, and you did transition 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you went on to transition into middle and then high. This is what's going to happen now, folks. K, transition. 1, 2, transition. 3, 4, transition. 5. That's significant, and we need to acknowledge that. And it does seem that that hasn't really been fully addressed or acknowledged by what's been going on in terms of what's published on the website and in terms of what has been discussed at the board. So as the board moves forward, you really have to ensure that these potentially damaging impacts that are going to have impact on the children of this district, but most importantly, the children with the most need in this district, you need to properly understand these problems and these concerns that are research-based, and you need to make sure that you aim off for this as much as possible. Kudos, once again, thank you so much for the work, your commitment to the greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for your time, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your input. Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question? Do we have that?
There's a lot of research about trans.
Do we have any other speakers this evening?
We do not. That's it.
Okay,
There were
thank
two,
you.
weren't there? No, one.
All right, so that brings us to our superintendent's report.
Okay, some updates, some reminders, some breaking news. First, end of year, it is that time where we are celebrating all of our students. So next week in the morning, on Tuesday morning, Furnace Woods will have their moving up ceremony to be immediately followed at 10 o'clock by the high school senior parade. The specifics of the senior parade have been communicated in a number of venues. I know Mr. Mackin has posted information and directly emails information to those families. On Wednesday, the 23rd, BV will have their moving up ceremony at 9:30, and later that day will be the middle school 8th grade car parade. On the 24th, Frank G will have their moving up ceremony at 9:30. And later that evening, the high school will have their graduation. So a lot of activities packed into a really short period of time, but we're looking forward to hopefully good weather because a lot of these activities are outdoors, and looking forward to seeing families and their children back in schools or school-related venues. On June 22nd, we also have the Indian Point Decommissioning Oversight Board initial meeting. This is a group or a committee that was established by the governor on December 31st, 2020. And the purpose is to provide oversight to the decommissioning process. There are many, many, many different members of the board, but I'll talk about a few of them, or I'll reference a few of them. The Commissioner of Environmental Conservation, the Commissioner of the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, the CEO of the New York Power Authority, members of the New York State Senate and Assembly, as well as the county legislators or from the county legislation, 2 representatives from labor unions who work at Indian Point, as well as a technical expert who has significant experience with decommissioning, and folks that represent environmental science areas. The reason I say this is because we have heard from many community members about the safety and the safety commissioning of the plant, and really who is in charge. And after speaking again with the gentleman who's going to lead this group on behalf of the governor, I want to let everyone know to tune in to the meeting on the 22nd. The town of Cortland will film it and it will be up on their website, and I'm sure we'll put it on ours. But it is expected that during our first meeting next week, we're going to talk about this issue because it's certainly been on the minds of parents and community members about testing, about having air sample quality tests as well as water tests take place at our schools, specifically BV. So this committee is going to look into that. They're going to determine if the committee can have an independent consult that can perform those tests and run those analyses. But what's most important is this is the group that can stop the process. This is the group that can stop the decommissioning if the criteria are not met. So for those family members who have reached out to myself and the board and who are talking about this in the community, we hope that they tune in next week because this exact topic will be discussed and there may even be some resolution to it because we know it's a hot button issue for everybody. The idea is that this oversight board will have the ability, if criteria and when criteria are met, to stop the decommissioning process, to work with the governor's office, to work with the federal government, work with the Nuclear Regulatory Committee to make sure that Holtec, who's decommissioning the power plant, is holding up their end of the bargain and that they're held accountable. So it's exciting news, but wanted to let the community know that we have heard you and certainly we have been advocating for that type of oversight with the governor, and we're going to discuss it in great detail next week. Yesterday or today, I usually get the news a day ahead of time, but our high school for the 4th year in a row was identified as a distinguished Project Lead the Way school. For 4 years in a row, Hendrick Hudson High School is just one of 204 high schools across the country. We offer Project Lead the Way programs in computer science, biomed, and engineering. And in order to be distinguished for the 2019-2020 school year, the following criteria had to be met, and they're pretty significant. I want to make sure I share them. 95% of the students had to take an end of course assessment. 25% of students or more participate in Project Lead the Way courses. Or of those who participated in Project Lead the Way courses, at least 33 took 2 or more courses, so a commitment to the program. The school had to offer and had students enrolled in at least 3 Project Lead the Way courses, so have the full complement of courses available to students. And the high school, which we met the criteria, had to have strategies and procedures in place to support the recruitment of students with regard to race, ethnicity, poverty, and gender to make sure that those students are represented in our Project Lead the Way courses. So I'm sure Mr. Mackin will take a minute during his academic update to fill in some more specifics, but this is breaking news and we're very, very proud of our staff, of the high school, and certainly the board that has made a significant, very significant financial commitment to this program so that students have a pathway to explore STEM-related fields while in high school. And as they graduate next week, we'll hear a little bit more about where they're going with their skills that they were able to develop right here in our programs. And lastly, as a introduction to our graduation, we want to recognize our high school valedictorian and salutatorian, valedictorian Madison Kivel and salutatorian Indrani Malhotra. 2 great, outstanding, committed, academic-minded females are going to give their speech and tell us about their experience next week. I'm also going to meet with them early next week, and we're going to do an interview as we typically do with the valedictorians and salutatorians. So you can learn a little bit more about them and who helped influence their academic prowess and where they're going, and some fond memories of Penn Hud. We also have an additional valedictorian, and this is Sarah Mendelko. Sarah is a Hendrick Hudson High School student, but also attends the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES Tech Center. And she is the valedictorian of the Tech Center. She participated in the sports medicine program. Actually, I interviewed her today. So we're cleaning up that video interview and we'll do the write-up and we'll get that out the door. So we'd like to congratulate Madison, Andrani, and Sarah on having great academic careers here in Hendrick Hudson High School, and particularly Sarah, who spent part of her high school days at the Yorktown campus of the Career and Tech Center. No. I'll leave it at that.
Does anybody have any questions for Joe before we move on? All right, so next up is committee reports. Joe, can you mute your mic? Next up is committee reports. The policy committee did meet this week. We'll be discussing that later because we have a policy reading, a first reading. Are there any other policies that anybody wants to, any other committees that anybody else wants to discuss this evening? All right, that brings us to our presentations and discussions.
Okay, we'll turn it over to Mr. Owens, who is going to share the year in review at Blue Mountain Middle School, continuation of our school reports that we typically give each spring before we wrap up the school year. And so thank you, Mr. Owens, for joining us, and we'll give you the floor.
Okay, thank you. Like Woodstock, it's taking as long for them to leave as it, actually longer for them to leave than it took to come in, but mostly everybody's gone now, so I'll stop looking out the window. Can I have the next slide, please? Or is that up to me? Thank you. So 3 successes, accomplishments regarding COVID protocols. We had we were ridiculously successful. The students were excellent from the very beginning, from last spring all the way through this year. Our ability to create plans and have the students follow them resulted in 0 cases being transmitted in the school as far as we can tell. And we can tell pretty far. So, you know, we'd have a positive case with a student, we'd quarantine those other students, or we might have a positive case with the staff member and quarantine the staff members in contact. And not once that I'm aware of did COVID ever spread from one person in the building to another person in the building. And that really is attributed to their ability and willingness to follow the rules. We started with masks, which no students were used to. I can honestly and frankly say that I've had way more discussions about students not bringing pens and pencils to class than I had with masks. It just wasn't a thing. We went to no lockers to maintain social distancing, which meant students were now carrying their backpacks, which is something for years we did not have them do. And they were able to adjust to that as well. Lunchroom, we went from the groups of tables where students got to sit with their friends to individual desks in the lunchroom. And again, you know, not nearly the same as it was in previous years, but the students worked with us and they did what we asked and without issue. As we brought students back into the building, we wound up splitting the lunches so that half the student body, one team would go out to recess first, the other would eat, and then they would flip-flop because we could no longer fit everybody in the eating area at the same time. And the students, again, were perfect with that. Although disjointed, some of the communication from the federal government down through the CDC, through the state government, when it was okay for students not to wear masks outside. Some kept them on, they're so used to them. That's a little kind of bittersweet that some were so used to it that they were reluctant to take them off even outside. But many enjoyed it, and we actually had more fun, less issues with supervision with splitting the 2 groups, because now the kids would be out there playing kickball and they didn't have to, you know, have such large teams, so they actually had better games. And then as they came in, they just put their masks back on virtually by themselves. Once in a while, a gentle reminder from a lunch monitor, and that's all it took. So that was made things quite livable despite some of the craziness that we went through. Another success were our transitions. We went from asynchronous last year to synchronous learning this year with the hybrid. And there were pros and cons to the asynchronous learning, certainly, and then the hybrid, honestly, there as well. But the students did what we asked them to do. We quickly, second, we're close with students with disabilities. Classified students were able to come back into the building 4 and then later 5 times a day. That was seamless as well. Blue Mountain, I'll speak to this in a minute or two, but Blue Mountain is remarkably good at identifying students that have any kind of struggles. So we quickly were able to find and identify some students that were struggling with the hybrid or the remote model and bring some of those students back. Then we had a full option for students to return every day. And, again, we had to make adjustments with the split recess, but all of those things went smoothly. So the transitions, and they were significant, and a number of them all went very, very well. The digital check-ins were something that were designed. Isabel Jefferson led a group last year that were trying to get ahead of the curve with the asynchronous learning and the remote learning last spring, and also anticipating this coming fall. So the digital check-ins, every teacher had a small group of students that they met with. They started with those Wednesdays. If you remember, Wednesdays were the days where students were remote. We were able to add a time in the day where all the teachers were able to check in with these students. And we were able to identify a number of students that were struggling because of that small group setting. And because the students that were full virtual were in that small group setting with students that were hybrid, there was a genuine positive interaction. And also when we had some students that really socially, emotionally were struggling, we were able to identify them and address them. So the digital checking was another accomplishment. The next slide, please. To be priorities moving forward, we have been using DBT for a number of years now in the middle school. And this coming year, what we plan to do is work to bring it to a wider array of students. So at this point, largely with DBT are groups that are identified as needing this level of intervention. So they're students that typically already see the social worker. Officially, those are mandated students, mandated by their individualized education profile. We also have students that see social workers as non-mandated students, and these DBT groups in the past were largely made up of those students. We'd like to make these skills more building wide. So we'd like to share these approaches and skills with a wider group of students and also the faculty as well. We're also looking in, there's a number of intertwined programs, Steps A and some things that the elementaries have done. So we're looking at the best way to incorporate those classes and bring them into the school day. One way we would do that is, for example, this year, some parents may have noticed that sixth graders had a class called Executive Functioning this year in lieu of traditionally the digital literacy class. So our digital literacy classes are part of that unified arts cycle. They still take place in 7th and 8th grade. They're actually taught by the library media specialist, which is how it should be done. And we have a different teacher teaching executive functioning, working with students in 6th grade. So virtually all 6th graders received 1 quarter of executive functioning, which really works with their organizational skills and that sort of thing. So what we would do is look to do something similar and incorporate the curriculum of a DBT or something like that, either in that class, part of that executive functioning, or embedded into the health curriculum, something of that sort. So we're working on that. Of course, there's a concern for students that have fallen behind as a result of COVID and the different ways we've been teaching, all those transitions we made. I will tell you that Blue Mountain has a very solid and fluid, tested and tuned protocol to identify students that are challenged academically, socially, emotionally, or any combination. So these things have been in place for years now, and they work quite well. So we're going to rely heavily upon them to continue to meet the needs of students. Very specifically, what we're doing is we've already begun intergrade discussions. The Blue Mountain has a team approach, so the teams of teachers meet together. They meet with their school counselor, and as many of you know, the counselors move from grade to grade with the students, so we have a common denominator. Each administrator works with 3 teams. We each work with 3 teams, so we have these tier meetings where we've been talking about students that might be at risk in any of those ways from September forward. And as we follow the kids through, again, the administrator and the counselors have some background with these students as they move from grade to grade. As a result of these meetings, we are able to identify students that might need extra help. With our low enrollment over the years, which precipitated a lot of the other discussions of the Princeton plan and so forth, but with that low enrollment, the district administrators have given us the luxury of using existing staff to meet the needs of these students. So our leveled literacy instruction program still is unbelievably successful. We identify students that are below grade level, 2 and 3 grades, significantly in some cases. We give them a class in addition to their English class, not instead of, so they're getting specific skill instruction to fill any gaps that they might have. Even under COVID conditions this year, with moving from hybrid to full participation, we still had over 30 students who were in the LLI program exit the program. So they don't stay in it. They don't languish in it for longer than they need to. And because of our schedule, if a student places out at the end of a quarter, we can move them throughout the school year and certainly at the end of the year into the next year. We have the same program with math. Mr. Bjornson, who we recognized earlier, has been teaching that class. Very similar results. He's able to pinpoint, identify gaps. Could be back from 3rd grade, could be back from who knows what. They're certainly going to be due to COVID in the near future. He can plug those gaps. His class as well is in addition to, not in lieu of a math class. So he's not doing 7th grade math homework with them. He's figuring out where those gaps are and addressing them. We then created tier 3 classes. So we do have a 7th and an 8th grade tier 3 math class. These students are students that either had Mr. Bjornson for key math, and they were in a special smaller class, still doing 7th and 8th grade New York State standards. So there's no difference in the state assessments or any assessments. It's just more, honestly, it's the special education approach. And we had our special educators work with our regular ed educators to work on the curriculum for these classes. So just like our 7th and 8th grade special class math classes are doing 7th and 8th grade math standards, so do these tier 3 classes. Students that have placed out of Mr. Bjornson's key math class, they often are placed in this tier 3 class. It's almost like a set of training wheels. We move from Mark's class, and now the students get the support of that smaller group before they go on into a typical 7th or 8th grade classroom. So those things have been very successful as well, and we are going to rely upon them to make sure that we identify students who might need extra help next year. Next slide, please. The new or unique initiatives that we'd like to carry on, the virtual meetings can be quite effective and powerful. I would maintain that a meeting like this is probably the least effective. It's one of the most difficult to do. I mean, even speaking before to people that I didn't even know if they were specifically out there or not can be difficult. But in a smaller, more specific setting, they're ideal. So typically, team conferences are something that take place at Blue Mountain. There aren't enough conferences, there aren't enough slots in the scheduled parent-teacher conferences that take place during the year. But we can do these meetings with teams during the school day. However, up until COVID, people had to take at least a half a day off from work because you had to come to us when our teachers were available to meet with you. So between time and getting to and from work, it really became a half day, if not longer. Whereas now someone can sneak into their car or an empty office and have a constructive team meeting. I would maintain, and I've been through many meetings this year, I would maintain that meetings are more effective virtually of this sort. There's less fluff and sidebar conversations and things like that. It might not be as informally enjoyable, but I would argue more effective. So the PTA meetings, that's a decision, certainly the PTA would have to be involved with, but we've had better turnout this year and last year with COVID with remote meetings than ever before. And as a result, we can do things like record those meetings. So people that weren't able to attend can get that information. And we started to actually solicit questions from the audience. So they were written, and then I was able to respond to those questions and also put them in writing at times so that there's somebody can refer back to that. So that's a great idea. Meet the teacher. I mean, that's more of a district decision, but there were a lot of positives, again, to not having to come do this crazy thing that I witnessed last night where with the parking lot is a zoo, and we're arguing with people that they're in fire zones, and we offer shuttle buses, but they don't necessarily want to take them. And the biggest complaint I've ever had for every Meet the Teacher since I've been here has been parking. So the virtual version of that, much more efficient and probably comfortable for many. Attendance meetings in the past, it's part of the district protocol for issues with student attendance. There's a meeting that's mandated after a student has missed 15 absences. And being quite frank, the more difficult the situation is for that family and that student, the less likely or the more difficult it is to schedule those meetings. By being able to do them virtually, we can do them. And there's something to be said, absolutely, I've said this my entire career, for a struggling student who comes from a family that might not have had the best experiences in school either, or might have the most difficulties getting to school. The people that these meetings that need to be the most important sometimes don't occur, whereas virtually they can. The same holds true for behavioral discipline meetings. Again, you have a struggling student, you have a parent that may or may not be tired of hearing about their child, and now to drag them in and miss again a half a day or more of work sometimes is counterproductive, whereas we could have a face-to-face meeting and it's quite productive and easier to arrange. I think the last slide is the final slide. So thank you for your attention, and I'm here for any questions you might have.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Owen? John, it looks like you did a good job. I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Okay. I'd also like to take the opportunity. I mean, this is what, 13 years principal, I think 16 years in the district. I started right around either at the same time or just after the two board members that are leaving. Haven't had the opportunity to see you as much as we used to in the last couple of years, but it's been a pleasure working for you for this long period of time, and I thank you. It was enjoyable.
Thank you too, John.
Thank you. We're good.
They said thank you, John. Before we transition to Jim, and I know John's going to go and police the Blue Mountain version of Woodstock, I want to thank John, and I'll use this opportunity to thank Jim as well. You know, they and their teams were given thankless jobs of being contact tracers and being a branch of the Department of Health all year. They were the ones that made the unfortunate calls telling athletes that they can no longer compete, or that their season was over, or students couldn't go away for Christmas break or Thanksgiving because they were associated with contact tracing or a known positive. And we were communicating regularly at all times of day. We had issues or some situations where we were communicated of a known positive at Blue Mountain, and we turned kids around before they got to school, or they were in school not for long and turned around, or we had staff issues because of the number of staff that were quarantining at the high school, and we had to go all remote. So thank you to John and Jim, because we were in an environment where we had to drop everything we were doing, and these are two gentlemen that value their time with their family, and I know that I was calling and texting them, taking them away from that. So thank you for being diligent and doing everything you could to keep your kids safe by dropping everything and making sure we did the right thing by kids and families. So thank you, John, and enjoy your evening, and we'll turn it over to Jim Mackin to talk about the high school.
Good evening, everyone. I want to echo John's comments quickly about Lori and Mary Pat. I've had the pleasure of working with them and for them for pretty much my whole career, and got to know their children and their families very well, obviously. And your presence will be missed on the board. for your willingness to be very honest and frank and open about your views and perspectives. I'm somebody that shares that approach, and I value it, as Carol mentioned, but you will be missed, and thank you for all you did to support my candidacy for principal, and also me in this position. I could not have been successful without that support, so thank you. Let's talk about the high school. This is, I think, the 18th year for me as a high school administrator, and I'll say it like I've said it in the past. Our high school matches up against any of the high schools in our area, and you can see, like Sarah Mandelkow. I want to stress that Miss Mandelkow was the valedictorian of the entire tech center of all the programs, so not just sports medicine. She was the #1 student of the entire tech center and all the districts that have students going there. She was the top dog. So I think that's tremendous. And obviously our two young women that are representing the valedictorian and salutatorian spots at the high school. I again appeal to my male brethren within the ranks of the rising seniors and juniors. We got to up our game, gentlemen. The girls have been crushing you, but congratulations to them. I want to talk about our year and try to be as brief as possible so we can get everybody home. I think I could echo a lot of things John said, but we were asked to talk about 3 successes, and I think one of them obviously focuses a lot around technology. One of the things that we did very successfully and in a very quick turnaround, and it wasn't without some hurdles, was the implementation of the Schoology platform. And we moved away from Google Classroom because we identified that we thought we needed a little bit more of a robust platform. And the high school, as has been the case since I've been there, has been the staff has been willing to pilot certain types of programs. So when Laura came to me and we discussed this in the late spring, I think, I had seen the platform and liked it. Some of my colleagues and peers use it in other districts. And it was just a more robust tool. It was a more all-in-one place, kind of one-stop shopping piece of technology. And we kind of did it baptism through fire. We jumped right in, and there was some trepidation at first, but through a lot of collaboration with the Lower Hudson Valley RIC, their person there, Randy Hall, obviously Laura supporting this initiative financially and also with any support she could offer, and our outstanding technology coaches, we were able to support our staff, and they were able to transition to using this tool effectively. Again, our tech coaches at the high school in particular that I can speak to are invaluable to the work that teachers did during this pandemic and will be moving forward. They're people that really look to provide the latest and greatest in approaches and using technology, and our staff takes a lot of takes advantage of that. We wanted to make sure, also that we picked a system that integrated well with Infinite Campus, because I think one of the things Laura identified early on was we had teachers going to a lot of different, parents going to a lot of different places. They were going to Infinite Campus, and then they were going to Google Classroom, the same for students. So Schoology allowed us to sync with Infinite Campus as well. So the grade books sync, and the data is a little bit more clean, and teachers don't have to input twice or 3 times and put things in different places. So that was another option. And by mid-year, I think we were cruising along. We'll continue to utilize this and expand on our use of Schoology. Our clubs are using it. It's also a very robust tool for clubs to communicate with our classes and the freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior classes, as well as all the other clubs that we have. Many of the advisors are using Schoology at this point. And, next year, I think our administrative team is really going to move to try to build our sites so parents have a place that they can go and find information as well. So Schoology was, I think, a big success considering the ambitiousness of rolling out a new system just, basically a month before school started. And teachers did a great job. Instructional technology, I think, goes without saying. Our instructional technology and our ability to use instructional technology went through the roof because we had no choice. And I think it'll be one of the lasting benefits of the terrible time that we've gone through is that even our technology phobic, teachers had no choice. And they had to jump in and learn how to use this stuff or drown. And they did it. And again, they did it with the help of our tech coaches, but also the leadership of Nick Katsaris and Anthony Giovinazzi, and their ability to collaborate with those tech coaches, find out what the teachers were talking about with the tech coaches, what their needs were, working with Laura and Edutech, and setting up virtual ed camps during PD days, so teachers could get information about things that they had questions about, or how to use new software or apps that we were using to make sure that their instruction was as robust as possible. I think we've been very, very successful there, and it's something that will last. The last success, I think, is that, in a pandemic, you're always worried about opportunities going away. And we saw that. We saw sports. We lost sports for seasons. We lost a number of things, but I think we were able to work with Margaret and Joe and Lisa and the district team to try to maintain as much of the schedule integrity as possible, and make sure that our students did not lose any offerings wherever possible. And I apologize for my phone ringing, which hopefully will go away in a minute. So the opportunities were available to students to make sure that they remain competitive, Sorry. All right. Can we go to the next slide? Two priorities for 21-22. What we know, and I'm sure you heard it in the elementary presentation, and John talked a little bit about, what we're going to be expecting or what we anticipate as far as learning gaps next year and where kids are going to be coming to school, where they're going to be in their learning. We've had some really great work being done by our support staff, in particular, our teaching assistants and teacher aides. And I really, as I sit back and think, kids are really going to need the ability to work one-on-one with some people when we have the opportunity to do so. So next year, we're going to be, opening our library, if all things go well, back to normal function, but we're going to create what I'm calling our learning lab. And we're going to outfit it with a teaching assistant. And that teaching assistant will be there to, through a schedule, work with students that are having difficulty in any of their subject areas. And they will, that teaching assistant will work directly with the students' teachers to find out what the need is, and then work one-on-one with that student to make sure that they're progressing as they need be. We have a Cracker Jack person at the high school that is just been unbelievable since she came there, Barbara LaFemina. She has single-handedly been responsible this year for getting at least 4 to 5 students in the last month to the finish line in our senior class. And she is a highly dedicated person. People know her. So I have talked with Barbara about doing this in our learning lab, and she is highly motivated to help our students in any way we can. So this will start to take form as we start the new year. It's nothing new. It's something that when I came to Hendrick Hudson, we had a learning center that was housed by a teaching assistant that did this very thing. and it was very effective. And I think we're going to need that one-on-one touch and that toughness that Barbara brings to it. You got to have the right person in the position, and I think she's the right person, and we're going to try to expand on that if it works well. The other priority is early in the year we started to look at forming a cultural responsiveness committee. And I want to be clear, this is not as a result of any of the conversations that have been going on recently surrounding, critical race theory or the such. It came about quite simply last year. At the end of the year, one of our graduates asked to meet with me after graduation. And she wanted to talk to me about her experience as a student at Hendrick Hudson. And it was a very enlightening conversation. It was a very hard conversation to listen to because many of the things that this person shared with me, I wouldn't say I was totally aware of. That prompted us to kind of move in a direction to start to examine, a group of people that would be interested in tackling this work, to make sure that all of our students at Hendrick Hudson walk away feeling like they had the best opportunities, that they had equitable opportunities, that they were recognized as individuals, and that they had the best experience possible. And the only way to do that is to start to have conversations that are sometimes difficult. But the way we approached this was we asked our staff who might be interested in being on this committee. It was completely voluntary. We got a very nice spread of teachers and staff that wanted to be involved. That group participated in trainings and conferences this year that we found and thought would be good as a basis for this work. And now we're waiting to talk with Joe and obviously hear from the board about how we can use this committee and align it with district goals that are focused around cultural responsiveness. I think this committee can do really good work and hopefully utilize our students to inform us about what we need to do to make Hendrick Hudson a better place. We always can be better. We can always improve. And I think this is, as our demographics change, as we evolve, we need to make sure that we're doing the right things. So that's going to be a focus. Obviously, it's going to need to be aligned with the district and how the district wants to approach this. I think Joe would agree that we don't want every school doing a different version of this kind of work. So we look forward to conversations at the district level in the future on this item. Next slide, please, Greg. Initiative program that we continue to work on, and it's similar to what John said, we think will be very important, will be our RTI program. This has been something that's been evolving for a number of years. And Margaret and Lisa have been involved with the work and advising our group and giving input about what this should look like, because it's a very hard program to implement at the high school. It looks a little different in middle and elementary school. It's difficult because of all the moving parts, many different teachers involved. Then you're weaving in the mental health perspective as well. So Mr. Giovinazzi and Mr. Katsaris have been leading this work under counsel from Margaret and her experience, and also Lisa. And we think we have it streamlined, and we're ready to do some really good work. This year has been a real good year as far as getting that process streamlined. We have looked at improvements to progress monitoring, creating interventions and supports, and making sure that it's a very collaborative approach, but again, streamlined. In our first version of RTI at the high school under this new plan, we had a number of committees. We had 2 committees. We kind of streamlined that because it was taking up too much time and it was difficult to get people together and really get the data that we needed. So we're looking forward to the effectiveness of this streamlined, evolved RTI process, and hopefully we'll be able to report back that it's been very successful as we transition out of a pandemic year in identifying students that need interventions to help them catch up or deal with the things that they're dealing with that are giving them trouble. Before I take questions, it's been a crazy year and a half. I think that goes, without saying, but I think I'd be remiss without saying a few things about just the job that our teachers have done and our students. Despite our best efforts to mess things up as a federal government, state and local government, and our banging our heads against the walls as administrators, trying to figure out what the heck they're telling us to do. Despite all of that, our teachers have been in the just in the thick of it, doing everything they can, trying to navigate something that they never thought they would, and our students as well. No matter what we threw at them, we're going remote on Wednesday. Oh, we have a COVID case. Oh, we're going 5 days, no 4 days. We're out this day, in this day. They just kept coming, and it's really something that should be recognized. The value that teachers bring to our social construct, I don't think is valued enough. I think, and I hope that this experience makes people think a little bit more about the value of the public school system and all that it brings to a community and to our society. Their work should be applauded over and over for what they did. They are heroes, and our kids are just some of the best. You heard Mr. Owens say it, and I would echo it. I've been in a number of schools. This is the only place where you say something, usually just once, and kids listen to what you're saying. They do it and they understand. They may ask you a question. They may want to talk about it a little bit, but they do it and they understand. And we're very blessed to work in a place like this. So I just wanted to make that statement. I'm rambling a little bit, but their work needs to be applauded on both ends. So thank you to our teachers and to our families and students. They've been great. And that's it. I'll take questions.
Thank you, Jim. Does anybody have questions?
I do. I just wanted to make sure, I actually wanted to ask John and Jim that when this first started and we had to do all of this, did we make sure that they had what they needed? Was there constant communication? Were they involved in everything in decision making? How did they feel that the board provided for them or not provided them, or what should we have known, or what should we have done, or to make their life easier, or anything like that? So when I had asked for some principal updates, it was more in the midst of it saying, wanting to know what they needed, what we could have done, what should have been done differently. So what have we learned from all of this? Or did they feel like they were out of control of their buildings? Was stuff being done where, I had a lot of parents, I told everybody that kids were in the cafeteria and so Jim, what do you think that we could have done better for you?
Lori, I think looking backwards is probably not helpful. I think that everybody did the best they could. As I said, despite our best efforts, and I said it jokingly, but I kind of mean it, we weren't, up until even today, we have not been given a level playing field to deal and manage our buildings and our districts. If you're talking about district level, we have a governor who's saying, lifting all these restrictions. And I've been driving home the parents over the last 2 weeks, a very detailed plan following guidelines that they released in April, at the end of April. So I think everybody did the best that they could. Certainly during the process, people get frustrated. I'm one of them, and we complain and we do what we do. But for the most part, I think, again, everybody was doing everything they could to make sure that kids were getting instruction, that kids that weren't coming to school and families that weren't engaging were trying to get in. You know, there's just not enough time. If you could give us more time in a 24-hour day and make it a 26-hour day, then maybe we'd have more time to meet. But there was just so many things being thrown at us. And really my focus turned from being an instructional leader to a cheerleader, to a mental health person, just trying to keep moving people forward. You know, that whole first half a year, I was having check-ins with my staff on a bi-weekly basis. And we were talking about basically nothing. We were just getting together and it made people feel better. So I think looking back, there's nothing we could have done to plan for this or to, and hopefully we never have to plan for something like this again. But I think we did the best we could. I think everybody looking back, I'm sure Joe, Lisa, Margaret, Laura would all say, listen, we just did everything we possibly could to keep the district moving in the right direction. And we got on the backs of teachers and students and they carried us again, in my opinion. You know, that's what they do, you know? So I didn't answer your question directly, but you know, I don't think going back and nitpicking anything at this point is a positive.
Sorry about that, Jim. So, and I see on the priorities, this cultural responsive, and you said it has nothing to do with what's coming up in New York State with the culturally responsive sustaining education framework, but I'm wary of that. You know, it's a very, very sensitive and hot topic that's sweeping over the nation. Yeah. I've been through some of the training and I have been through stuff that quite frankly is very, very scary. So when we talk about this, I know this is going to be on the board for their topics and such, but I want to be very careful that, you know, if you read throughout it, if you read it, there's a lot of stuff that says, you know, just on page 9, it talks about oppressors and oppressing, and, you know, it's embedded in every little section that we really better be careful, because we're here to teach children and not to shame them. Yeah. So when we also talk about cultural, I would hopefully imagine that we're doing that already. That I mean, as a teacher, I did it because I teach in an extremely diverse, and you know, we celebrate it all the time, but it doesn't mean it has to be embedded in every single one of our lessons. I teach math. It's very hard to do that. You know, you change some names, but you have to be very, very careful about what's going to take place. So I don't know if you can share anything out loud about our young student who came to you at the end of the year with a specific, probably not in public, but, you know, I just really want the rest of the board to be very careful about the future, because you really have to read this framework very carefully and see what it's saying. You know,
what I want to be clear about, Lori, just to be clear, and maybe I misspoke. What I wanted to be clear about is, because I knew that there would be potentially questions, and particularly I know that I was expecting it for you to ask a question about this, because I know that, you know, that you've done work with this. I wanted to be clear that this was more organic than a reaction based on what's going on with, you know, this CRT and the framework that, you know, from the state. This was organic in the sense that a student came to me as the principal of their high school, or their former high school, and wanted to share with me the experiences they had as a student, as a Black or brown student. And to me, these are things that I needed to hear. And I think we make a lot of assumptions that we are doing things to make people feel included or to make them feel comfortable. But I think we make some big assumptions sometimes. My intention as an educator is not to exclude or to oppress or to make anybody feel, you know, bad in any way or negative. As I said in my presentation, the purpose of doing this is to make sure that we're hearing from our kids about what we can do better in our school, what we can do to make them feel more accepted or more comfortable, because quite frankly, that conversation with that student, she was not. And on the surface, if I mentioned the student's name, which I will never do, if you saw this student and I said her name, you would say, what? No way. She didn't have that experience, because oftentimes I think students have to adapt to their environment and they have to behave or pretend in certain ways because they don't feel comfortable. So that's not an indictment of Hendrick Hudson High School. It's just, we need to listen to our students more about a lot of things. I could be saying the same thing about curriculum, classes, lunch, what the food we serve. I mean, we have to listen to our students. And to me, the reason I started that, and Margaret and Joe and Lisa and Laura, we started to have these conversations early last year, right before the pandemic hit. But for me, when a student comes as a principal, I have to react to that. I have to rethink what's going on. And we have to go very slowly. I agree, we have to be very careful. We have to make sure that we educate ourselves. We have to make sure that we get information that we need. And we have to make sure that we talk to our students. We have to be very focused on what our students need, what our community is, who we are. And, I look forward to doing this work. As I come to the end of my career, I think it could be some of the most important work that I do as a building principal. And I look forward to the board giving us some direction about what they want us to look at, and us sharing our ideas about how we can get deeper than just, celebrating Black History Month or recognizing, whatever. There's more to it than that. I think it's about teachers and staff and people understanding who people are, teachers and students, who they are beyond student and teacher. Making that connection, because what we do know is when students feel connected, they will run through brick walls for teachers. And John hit on it with Mark Bjornson and Donna Miller. Those are two right there that have deep connections with their kids, Black, brown, white, yellow, whatever. And those kids they want to please them. They want to work as hard as they can. They're motivated. That's what we're looking for across the board. So I just wanted to stress, this wasn't about CRT and the framework that just came out recently. It was organic, about a student coming to a principal to say, listen, yeah, I did have a good experience for the most part, but some of these things were very difficult to deal with. And I needed you to know. And I applaud her for that. That takes a lot of courage.
Okay, I just want to go back. So this is beyond just the high school and the middle school. So it's a question for you, Joe. We touched on this before, is that a lot has happened throughout this pandemic. The assumption is we start next year, we're coming out of it, things are going to be better. Is there a post-mortem or anything planned where we can start to document some of the learnings that we got from the pandemic, things that went well, things that didn't go well, things we would do differently if anything like this ever happened again, and things, right, and things that we can apply towards education going forward. So for example, all the use of technology, right, that we've now gotten accustomed to, can't that be leveraged going forward to do a lot more of this remote type work? Mr. Owens was talking before about the success he had with having meetings with parents over Zoom rather than having to have them in person and not show up. So I think there are a lot of big benefits we can get from this. So the question is, do we have a post-mortem set up? Because I don't think that specific question was asked.
No, no, officially no. And I don't know if Joe has, I'm sure there's been discussions about creating, and kind of mining some data from teachers and students and stakeholder groups about this. I definitely think unofficially there is a lot that we've learned. We've learned, number one, that we can do a lot of things that we said, we often would immediately say we can't do, so I think the technology is here to stay. I think we're looking at technology differently, from a hardware perspective as well. Laura and I have talked a lot about, going completely away from desktops, even as a teacher station in the classroom, which I've been trying to get my teachers to do for a long time. But now, since they've gone through a pandemic and were given laptops, Laura was able to get them laptops to use. Now they understand the functionality of not being anchored to a desktop in the classroom. Now they can work wherever they want it to go. They don't have to have that. So I think there's a lot of things, but again, it's time to sit down and kind of focus our attention on that topic for a little while to create that list, Corey.
And let me weigh in a little bit bigger at the 30,000 foot level, Corey, is that it appears that the State Education Department has asked the regional BOCES to lead those discussions in districts. And the reason is so that information can get completed by school, by district, by region, and then funneled to the state so that there can be some asks. The asks could be financial, the asks could be some leniency or some regulation relief. The asks could be, again, some new regulation, because most of our rules that govern public schools are written in the 50s. So the idea is to have a coordinated effort. So then you can partner schools. So then Jim and his high school principal committee can talk about best practices, things that worked, things that didn't, what to avoid, what purchases, what software did they make, what didn't they make. At the elementary level, we received a lot of questions. I know Margaret did too, about how we got elementary kids in every day. So that postmortem is important, and I think we've got one shot to do it, and I think the state wants to try to have a coordinated effort across 700 plus school districts, and that's what they're signaling to us right now. So I'm sure we'll hear more about it in the summer when parts of public education are permitted to reopen, because we're still not out of it. I still can't tell you what instruction will look like next year. But yes, it's on the radar, and I think the state is trying to approach it pretty strategically so that it can be used. It can be used to leverage some important policy discussions that need to be had. Thank you.
Hang on one sec, we're having technical difficulties.
I was going to say, is this what they call an uncomfortable pause? Like, yeah.
Can you guys hear Lisa talking?
Okay. Hi, sorry about all that.
Yes, they can hear you.
Can you hear me now, everybody? Okay, great, thanks. So my question was just about the learning lab that you're talking about, Jim, and trying to find out how the students are identified for that and how they are selected to participate in that. I think it sounds like a really wonderful program, and I was just wondering if you could explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be identified from a number of avenues. Obviously, I talked about RTI, and that could be a potential intervention that, could result from an RTI referral. Many times referrals, again, overuse this term organically, it'll just be simply a teacher reaching out to a guidance counselor who then would, could refer that student to, hey, listen, on a very low level, why don't you head over, you have a free period, 5th period, Mrs. LaFemina would be in the library, and you can start to work with her, so some of it will be more informal. A lot of it will be formal through RTI. But again, like I said, you get the right people in the right spot. Barbara has been able to really motivate and get some kids working. She works well with our teaching staff, which is what we need her to do, to be able to communicate with the math teacher and say, hey, what does Jimmy Mackin need? He's failing. And for her to be able to communicate, identify where the work needs to be done, and then to utilize free time in that student's schedule more efficiently, rather than, relying on that bulk study hall and more independent work, or a learning center that has 15 kids in it. This is an opportunity for a student to maybe work more independently and individually with a teaching assistant. If it works well, we don't have a lot of teaching assistants at the high school. We have 2, so we'll expand to maybe 2, depending on what the needs are in the other classes instructionally, and try to really make it something that can be very targeted for students. I hope that answered your question.
Lori, you're back on. I know you had a follow-up question, right?
There you go.
There it goes. So Jim, I just want to say thank you. And I want to say thank you to all the teachers too, because I kind of know what you're going through, and what a fantastic job that, or the best possible fantastic job that we could have done under all these circumstances. So please, if teachers are watching, if anybody in the school, the nurses, the secretaries, I really appreciate everything that everybody has done, because it's just been an unbelievable year. And our kids are fantastic. No matter where the kids are, they have risen to the occasion also. So I just want to say a big thank you to everybody, because I know with these Zooms, and Corey, to your thing, like we were doing this before, believe it or not. So I'm glad that you guys are going to start utilizing. I mean, there's Google Hangouts where, we could meet with teachers, and we can meet with each other, and we can meet with parents. So I'm glad we're doing everything. But I just want to say thank you so much for everybody in the school for doing the best they can. And congratulations to all the kids for stepping up to the plate too. I know it's been very difficult. I see it with my own kids. I spend 11 o'clock at night with them trying to go over their math work and getting them ready for APs and stuff. So kudos to everybody. And if I may too, there was a couple of meetings ago where I made a remark about custodians and something about bleach. You guys have worked your tails off. So I want to apologize now for that. It was a little bit of sarcasm. So I really want to apologize. It was about cleaning or something like that. So just, we really appreciate every single person who has really stepped up to the plate. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Julie? All right, I'd just like to echo what Lori said. Thank you very much for all of your efforts this year, for your staff, for yours, everybody's, and thank you so much for listening to that student who came to you, and for being open-minded and really, taking the bull by the horns and being proactive to try to make this school a comfortable climate for everybody. So thank you for taking that initiative as well. And we look forward to having more of those conversations over the next year and determining what is best for our school and for our kids, and what we want to follow that program up. All right, so I think that. What?
Bill has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bill, you have your hand up. Okay, Bill.
In line with, Jim, I appreciate, like Carol said, that you listened to that former student. Is this something maybe we can make more formal as like an exit survey for our students, maybe not just at the high school, when they graduate high school, but maybe when they leave each school, some kind of exit survey for things they think could have been more comfortable or better. I think you're going to get probably the most creative and thoughtful and useful input probably from the middle school and the high school, but I don't know if the elementary would be able to give true value to students in something like that, but I'm sure an appropriately designed survey might be useful. Your comments bring that to mind, that I'm sure there's a lot of other students that could maybe highlight some things we could be doing better, and we just don't know it. And it's not hard, we just don't know it.
Yeah, I think it does go back to a conversation Joe and I had about, and it's, I'll say the two words, strategic planning around this item. I think we really have to identify what we want to accomplish with these groups. There's a lot of things under the umbrella of cultural responsiveness, and there's a lot of instruments out there, valid instruments that measure bias and measure all kinds of things that we could give. I would just hate to do something like that, collect that data and not have a goal in mind other than the really broad goal of, hey, we just want to be more equitable, or we want to make, those are really broad strokes. I think we have to be very targeted in what we want to accomplish with these groups, and we have to do it together, K-12. It can't be, Donna's doing one thing, I'm doing another thing, and Joe has been very clear about that to me. So I've been very slow in, trying to get our group some information and training and give them some stuff to chew on, to think about as we, as a district, start to identify goals. I think it's a great idea. Those are hard things. They're not hard things to give, but when you ask questions like that, you have to have the constitution to be able to take what you get, and then you have to be willing to change. That's hard to do. So, but I think it's a necessary evil. So I think it'd be good. But I think we need to have targeted goals before we start collecting.
When I made the comment, Jim, I wasn't talking purely family cultural.
Oh, I get it.
I'm talking, when I came to the high school, there could have been a better introduction to this part of the high school.
Oh, yeah.
General global enhancements to our system, not any focused one area, but a broad spectrum. And I think it needs to have areas that would leave open that we're not necessarily aware of, because you need some open-ended questions and something like that. Otherwise, you're just going to get the yes, no's to what you're looking for. You don't know what you should have asked and didn't.
Right. Absolutely. And I agree. When I use culture, I'm talking about the high school culture. I'm not talking about, background. I'm talking about the high school as a culture in of itself, a community in itself. And within that, there are, there's cultural responsiveness needs, but there's also just user needs. Did we have the classes that people wanted? The classes that we do have, are they outdated? Do we need more math electives? Project Lead the Way, some of the Project Lead the Way courses came about because students came, Mary Pat's son was part of one of them. They wanted a course in aerodynamics. They petitioned me. They gave me a reason. They gave some data, and we went to the board with, at the time it was Dan McCann, and we put an aerodynamics class in. So kids will tell us how to be successful. We just, as adults, sometimes forget that they're the people we're serving, and we don't really ask them. We just kind of, I do anyway, assume that I know more and, I know what's best, and it's never really works the right way.
I think that's a great idea. I love the surveys at the end. We do that with our kids, and it's great. I thought we were doing it, but that's a great idea.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Speaking of student involvement, Jim, I know as a board, we had talked earlier, or late last year, I guess, about getting a student rep for the board again. And COVID happened, and so we never got our student rep. So something to keep in mind for next year. We'd love to have a student rep on the board again. We used to do that on a regular
Yeah.
basis, and it's
student government.
yeah, I know. it
Get,
comes from student
we'll get
government, so
Mrs.
I'm
Pipchinsky
sure
on
Jen
it.
can be involved in that.
It was
Yeah, we'll get
Jazz
Mrs.
one year.
Pipchinsky. She'll get somebody.
All right,
Absolutely.
any other questions for Jim before we let him go? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good-
Be well. Stay safe.
All right, that brings us to our policy reading. We have a first reading of a policy this evening, which is a policy on door hardening. Would someone from the policy committee like to start this off?
The New York State Education Department has permitted schools to allow door vision panels to be covered and doors to be barricaded in an emergency.
Second
Move to
reading.
waive
then.
further reading.
Okay, that then, yes.
So this, this is on the heels of Park, New York State.
You're muted.
Okay, this is on the heels of Parkland. New York State Education Department received a lot of feedback, sort of, Corey, as you mentioned, a retrospective of various school events. This was one of them. And they heard input from the field. They took input from law enforcement and other agencies that deal specifically with school responses. And what they found is that schools are saying we need real-time authority to respond in really tricky and difficult situations for safety purposes, but the bureaucracy of some of them mentioned earlier, the bureaucracy of some of the rules and regulations that govern education are really out of touch. So after a lot of debate and a lot of reflection, New York State is permitting schools to pass a policy like we have, like we're proposing, allowing staff and allowing schools to harden their doors, basically beef up classroom-based security practices in the event of a school emergency. The board has to establish that policy to essentially give permission for that action to be articulated in the school-based safety plans that need to be submitted and on file at the State Education Department. So it's a really important policy, and it's one of the, it's a really common sense policy too, especially considering what happened just a few short years ago.
Does anybody, oh, Alex, you have a question?
My question is about how are we going to define emergency, and will that be spelled out in our safety plan? So is there going to be like a code word? Like, how will teachers know that it's an appropriate time or not?
Yes, it's absolutely spelled out in our safety plan and in school specific plans. That safety team, yeah, yes, that's not public. So I can't tell you what those words are. But yes, there's a communication, and depending on our advancements in technology, in fact, even the signaling that can be done, that can send the message that will basically trip the provisions in this policy for door hardening to take place.
Does anybody else have questions? All right, we will be, Bill, go ahead.
So are we talking about new hardware, or are we talking simplistic coverings?
Very simplistic coverings, as well as being able to barricade the door shut with furniture or other equipment. So the state chose door hardening, but it has nothing to do with the hardware or the physical door.
Okay, so it can be as simple as a piece of paper over the window.
Which without the policy violates fire code. And let me tell you, one person who's really interested in seeing this policy implemented is Anthony Merlini, because he takes a tour of all the classrooms in the schools by himself, and then we get random checks by different fire code agencies. And we're telling elementary or kindergarten teachers to take down word walls or other things where they've run out of space. So it makes sense, and it increases safety, and important thing for us to do.
Thank you. I was just looking ahead to see what this meant for facilities and, thank you.
All right, this is a first reading on this policy. We'll be bringing it back for a second reading before we'll be doing any voting on it. So that brings us to our next audience comments section, the audience comments on agenda items. I'm not going to read the rules of the engagement again. Is there anybody who is here to make comments? Nope. Okay. So that brings us to our board comments, new business section, and we do have a proposed resolution. Who's presenting that?
Yeah, I can present it. So the idea behind this resolution that we would submit to NYSSBA to lobby on our behalf, the idea that the open meetings law now says that if there is a remote board trustee that takes the meeting, let's say from home or from a vacation spot or a remote location, they have to make that location known to the public and open up that location for access. So in theory, if you're taking a remote meeting from home, you have to let people know your address and open up your home and let them sit in your living room and watch over your shoulder to watch the board meeting. So the proposal here is for them to change that law and allow for this to happen, because we've had great success with the remote options for a number of people. And I think it will reduce absenteeism, it will increase engagement, and it's increased engagement for the public. So I think it's a great option to have, not a requirement, but an option to have.
I can try to unmute again, but I don't think it's.
Do I need to read it?
Are you not unmuting? No, I don't think you need to do it.
I am unmuting. That doesn't seem to be doing anything, so.
Sure. Come on.
Sorry, guys.
You want to
It's
take my
okay,
chair?
I can kneel.
It's okay.
So anyway, just the thing that we wanted people to know about this particular resolution is this allows NYSSBA to advocate for these things on the behalf of other school boards. And so it would be proposed at the annual meeting that NYSSBA has in October, and it would be voted on. And if the majority of the participating school districts approve of it, then they would be permitted to advocate for this particular rule to happen. We have some interest from Croton and from Brewster in joining us in
everybody.
Well, I think there'll be more than that, but at least to co-sponsor or to sign on in it with this resolution. There's some definite interest in that. In fact, those other school districts are going back and they're talking about it with their board to see if there's any tweaks or any changes to the wording of this that they'd like to make. And then our board will need to approve it and say that we want to co-sponsor this particular resolution, and then it would go forward and would be submitted. So that's it. Any questions about it from anybody?
When does this need to be submitted? I forget.
By July 16th.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? None. Comments? No. So I think we have to decide whether we're in favor. Do we actually have to make a motion and vote on whether we're in favor of putting this forward?
Not until we have the final vote. We have the final vote first.
Does anybody have any comments, questions, suggestions for the wording?
We'll come back to us and Brewster with it.
All right, so we'll be seeing this again after these guys get together with the other districts and finalize the wording, and hopefully it'll pass, because it seems like our technology has gotten to the point where we should be able to offer this option for people who are traveling on business or unable to come out to a meeting or for whatever reason. So, all right, good work. Thank you.
There you go.
Go ahead. Okay. What I was asking, sort of with that, on the flip side of that is looking at the agenda right now. People who, if we have the opportunity for people to come here, they cannot come to. They're not allowed to dial in, or they can't be. The chatting is closed. They're not allowed to remote. There needs to be both ways then, for the same way for other people. If they're traveling and they can't come, that opportunity has to go both ways, so that they have the opportunity to come to dial in and speak about things that are concerning to them, as well as to as well as we do. I mean, I think it's sort of ridiculous that they have to do one or the other. I mean, if we can dial in because we're traveling or we're home or whatever, they should be able to like reach out to us and have their voices heard, whether they're traveling or whether they're in a situation like that.
100%.
So I think that has to go both ways. It's not part of the resolution, but I do think it needs to be, that option has to be made available for meetings going forward.
Do we have to, is there a need to change the open meeting law for that? Or is that something we can just decide on our own?
That may be, I'll ask that question of NISBA. That may be a NISBA participation in school board meetings in general. Public participation in school board, that may be at the NISBA level, that they can change because they're the advocacy group. The open meetings law is a whole different ballgame. That includes municipalities, that includes, your local government, so on and so forth. So I think we may have more control over how we permit participation, more control than we have allowing you or someone else to participate in an open meeting at home.
Right. And I think we do have that now, right? Carmen, if someone emails you or contacts you and says, I want to zoom into the meeting.
We're not, we did this past time, we let them come into the Zoom meeting.
Right.
If we continue with Zoom meetings, then they'll be able to do that.
Yeah, so I think we have this capability and we've used it already. We should be using it more, or encouraging it more.
It says here they can. Not this current meeting, we did for one meeting, we did allow that.
Yeah, I would think that we would want to do this for every meeting where Zoom is used, or, where we have this remote capability.
Yeah, remember, we're all still operating under the governor's executive order about being able to even conduct business remotely. So, that's the first domino that will fall, is he will probably no longer extend that executive order. And then it becomes a NISBA question as to whether they will permit school boards to allow remote participation in. And then that would be a local decision, I would imagine, that we would have to contemplate.
But I think at the end of the day, whatever we can do more.
Sure. We have to decide how we're going to be broadcasting these. Are we going back to just having the camera, in which case people aren't zooming into the meeting? If we're all present here and under normal circumstances, and every once in a while someone has to zoom into the meeting because they're away for business, then our technology for the meeting is going to be very different. We won't have these Zoom capabilities.
I think we should do Zoom in every meeting going forward, because there are so
we'll
many.
be discussing this during the summer, how we want to do the meetings going forward. Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of good ideas. I think we need new board trustees on here as well to weigh in, since they'll be in these meetings also. And as you know, we'll be talking about this a lot further.
Yeah.
So when does this executive order expire? I don't know.
It expires when they stop renewing it. So they, it sounds like a goofy answer. The executive order, I think, continues to be extended, and if it's not extended, then it's dead. So it has continued to be extended. So for example, I remember one month, it was the last day of whatever month, and it got extended at like 11:42 p.m. that day, because if it wasn't extended, then the executive order is no longer in effect. So it's a passive action, right? If it's not extended, then it no longer is in effect. There is not an act of the governor to undo it, only to extend it.
And when does the current extension expire?
We would have to look. It's very likely he has aligned them with the end of each month. Yeah.
I think the legislature is currently, yeah, sorry, this doesn't do anything for COVID, does it, Cora? Sorry. The legislature, I believe, is currently investigating legislation that would make it so that as long as the pandemic is in effect, the open meetings law would be suspended. And there would no longer be the executive orders every 30 days. It would just be as long as there's this emergency in place with the pandemic, then we'd be allowed to continue with the open meetings law suspension.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, any other comments or board new business before we wrap up the meeting? All right, can I have a motion to close the meeting?
Sorry.
And Mary Pat seconds for their last meetings, all right. All in favor? Aye. Have a good evening. Our next meeting is scheduled for July 7th, correct? Not the 9th, 7th, which will be our reorganization meeting. We'll see you in a few weeks. Bye.